Guess what? A Xanax never killed anyone, and a Percocet never killed anyone. They do now because they're fake. And a lot of these young kids, they just don't know.
Can you hear the fire in her voice? April Babcock is on a mission to tackle our nation's drug crisis with a sharp focus on the alarming prevalence of fentanyl. So passionate is her drive that each year she organizes a march on the Capitol in D.C., determined to grab the attention of lawmakers and demand immediate action. Take a listen to last year's rally.
Right to the White House. Here we come, President Biden.
Here we come, President Biden.
Borders are, here we come.
Yeah.
We want that border secure. Without border security, you can't have security in America. We need something to happen immediately.
299 people dead are being poisoned.
No one's going away.
They got to do something different. They can't treat it like they were treating the crisis 10 years ago because it's not the same. You got instant death in the drug supply. They have got to do something different, or we're going to get bodies on bodies on bodies.
In this episode of Grieving Out Loud, hear why Babcock is so fired up about fentanyl. This is an episode you won't want to miss, as it exposes the harsh truths and highlights the pressing need for a fresh approach. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to make a difference. April, welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I am so sorry that we're meeting under the circumstances of us both having lost a child to fentanyl, but I'm very grateful for all the work that you're doing to try to put an end to this horrible epidemic.
Thank you for having me on the show, Angela.
Let's talk about Austin, your son, your 25-year-old son. Can you tell me what happened with Austin?
I almost avoid talking about him. Really hard for me. But he started playing soccer in kindergarten, and he played all sports in elementary school. But his favorite, that boy lived for soccer. He played it all year round. He was the star goalie. When he was a freshman, they actually put him up in varsity because he was that good as a freshman. He was good. He was very talented. So his senior year of high school, he was kicked off of the soccer team for more than one failing grade, which I think is a complete nightmare. It wasn't like he was messing around. He just literally struggled his whole life. He had a learning disability. His ninth grade year, he was on a third grade reading level when he was in ninth grade. But to make a long story short, his senior year, he was kicked off the soccer team. And that's when it all started. So he was severely depressed, started hanging out with an entirely new group of people, and started out with marijuana. People think marijuana isn't a gateway, and they just legalized it here in Maryland. It is a gateway. He started off with marijuana at the age of 19.
And same with my daughter. Started off with marijuana about 15. And marijuana is not for kids. It's not for the developing brain. And quite frankly, every person I've talked to who suffers from substance use disorder, especially opioids, I know maybe opioids weren't your son's drug of choice, but they started off with marijuana. That's how it starts.
Look, the marijuana dealer knows the coke dealer. The coke dealer knows the dope dealer. So his buddies he started hanging out with smoking marijuana. Well, I found out later it was a coke dealer. My son was living with a coke dealer after he graduated school. He lived with a buddy of his for a year for free. And I was just like, why is this dude letting you live with him for free? It made no sense to me. Well, I was figuring it out, but I did figure it out. He was selling cocaine. And I didn't even know a lot of this until after my son died. When I got his phone, I was looking at pictures in his phone after he was dead of lines of cocaine when he was like 20 and 21. His drug of choice was cocaine, but at the very end of his life, he started smoking it. So that's crack. I know at the end of his life, he even started snorting dope to come down from his cocaine high. And a lot of people that are addicted to coke, they'll go out and get just a dime of dope, $10 worth of heroin, Not saying they're going to do it all, but you do one line of heroin, it'll bring you right down from your cocaine high. So you're not out spending all your money on
Yeah.
cocaine.
It's really typical now for people to do meth or cocaine or something like an upper, and then to
Yeah.
do heroin or some other opioid to bring them down. It's very, very typical among drug users. And you believe that the root of his addiction, though, was based, as so many are, in shame, in that high school experience where he lost what was important to him and was probably deeply ashamed of it, right?
I don't know if it was he was ashamed of it. He was pissed. His whole life, he lived and breathed soccer. And his senior year, they took that from him. Some of these kids, the only good thing going in their life is their sports. And then you're going to take it from them?
Whatever the reason, Austin turned to drugs. April says it progressively got worse. At first, she didn't even realize he was using drugs, but as time went on, it became more and more apparent. The last few months before his death, she couldn't ignore it.
His drug of choice was coke. And I know the last 6 months of his life, he started smoking it. It's still cocaine, crack, coke, it's all the same. The last 2 years of his life, he started dating a girl who was a heavy heroin user. And I told him, if you stay with her long enough, you're going to do what she's doing. No, I won't. No, I won't. No, I won't. And this is before he had ever tried crack. I already knew he was kind of like a drug hopper. Whatever was around, it's like, I know he had a problem popping Xanax for a while. He used to do whippets. He smoked pot. He snorted cocaine. And then last 2 years of his life, I know he tried heroin with his girlfriend. He admitted it to me. My son never threw anything out, ever. So if there was a cap of dope, I did rummage his room because he was living back with me. I rummaged his room all the time. Hey, you living in my house? I'm going to be nosy. I know you're doing drugs. I have his little brother living here.
Right.
So it was just a nightmare, but his drug of choice was coke. At the very end, his drug of choice was crack. And I believe he was doing crack and then getting a dime of dope to come down from the crack.
While April knew her son was abusing drugs, she never would have predicted what happened next. In January 2018, Austin died from cocaine and fentanyl. However, April believes that her son didn't know he was ingesting fentanyl, just like so many others who have died in our nation's drug epidemic.
I ended up getting a police report after the fact. And when I pulled it out to read it, this was a year and a half after my son died. It said CDS residue. There was a straw with CDS residue. And I'm like, okay, was it heroin that had no heroin and was all fentanyl? So did my son die from fentanyl and heroin, but there was no heroin? Or did my son actually die from fentanyl and coke? And I think a lot of us parents, we're just really never going to know the truth. Because, what if your kid, I'm not saying kids are dying smoking weed, but what if your kid was smoking weed? And then what if your kid also popped a Percocet or popped a Xanax or popped an Adderall? And when they're fake, the only thing going to show in the toxicology report is the fentanyl. You won't see Percocet. You won't see Xanax. None of that's going to show up because fake pills are fake. That's exactly what they are. They're 100% fentanyl and whatever binding powders the cartels use to bind these pills or drug dealers here in their basements.
Unfortunately, fake pills are all too common. The U.S. is battling the deadliest drug epidemic in history, fentanyl being a major culprit. As we've told you on our Emily's Hope news headlines, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that approximately 75,000 out of the nearly 110,000 overdose deaths in 2022 were potentially linked to fentanyl. This harrowing statistic not only signifies countless lives lost, but also millions of people suffering the profound grief of losing someone they love. So I know how devastating it is to lose a child, and I know wanting to do something. That's the whole basis of our charity, Emily's Hope, is wanting to try to prevent this from happening to other people. And it keeps happening. We know that it keeps happening. But you formed Lost Voices of Fentanyl. Tell me how that came about and what your mission is.
So, I didn't lose my son and then go out the gate and form Lost Voices of Fentanyl. Like, I literally prayed, cried, and screamed for 18 months. I went to Israel on his 1-year anniversary to be closer to God. I was in Bible studies, going to church, praise and worship. For me, it was 100% running to Jesus. Like, I knew I could not handle my grief on my own. Because honestly, even with God in my life, I wanted to die. Like, these poor parents, us parents that lose our kids, we live and breathe for our children. And now they're just a plane full of kids every day. 300 plus kids a day are dying. This is not normal. But that's how I started. I just prayed and prayed and prayed. And then one day, God started answering my prayers and I was hearing from him. And I formed my group October 7th of 2020, Lost Voices of Fentanyl. I had a rally in front of the Chinese embassy because China is the head of the snake. They're killing off Americans and they're doing a great job of it without us doing anything back in return. Our government needs to sanction China. They're supplying the precursor chemicals to the cartels to kill us. This is a weapon of mass destruction.
You're right. You're right. China is supplying all of the raw ingredients to the Mexican cartels, where the Mexican cartels are assembling it and putting it in every drug and getting it into our country. And one part of this that's not talked about very much, and I know many of these people are suffering from addiction themselves, but about 80% of the drugs that contain fentanyl are being dealt in the United States by Americans, by U.S. citizens. So you got this chain, right? It's starting in China, and certainly China is not a friend to the United States.
Like, that's why I support drug-induced homicide. I want them all locked up. Like, I don't think we're going to lock our way up out of this crisis, but when they're trafficking fentanyl, people in the United States trafficking fentanyl, when one sweet and low packet, 1 gram, has the potential to kill up to 500 Americans, they're mass murderers. These people don't deserve any grace whatsoever. They deserve prison.
Well, and some people now are addicted to fentanyl, which is quite shocking to me. People are seeking out fentanyl, and you're playing Russian roulette no matter what illicit drug you use. But when you're seeking out fentanyl, I mean,
I understand it quite well, actually. Almost no one has gone out the gate seeking fentanyl. It always starts with deception. Heroin users were the first people being preyed upon. They wanted heroin, but no, they were getting hooked on fentanyl unbeknownst to them. And once you're dependent on it, it's too late. So everyone who's taking them Percocet, taking the Xanax, taking the Adderall that are fake, for the people that do not die, they're getting dependent on it. And when you're dependent on it, yeah, then you're going out seeking it, but it's still a poisoning. There is no safe dose of illicit fentanyl. Absolutely zero. And honestly, what's a safe dose of heroin? What's a safe dose of cocaine, crack, MDMA? There is no safe dose of any illicit drug. Just because people can grow a tolerance to an illicit drug still does not imply there's a safe dose to take.
And you have so much passion. I can hear, the fire in your voice. I know you're channeling that through your group. What do you hope to accomplish through Lost Voices of Fentanyl?
The days of crying behind closed doors are over. That slogan just came to me like that. And that's one reason why I made my group public, because the world needs to see what's going on. I was in all these groups before I created mine, and they all were private. The only way to get in there is to have a dead child. And I'm like, how in the world is everybody else going to see what's going on if the only way you can get in a group is if you have a dead kid? No, we need the world to see what's going on. It's almost like we have to tip the scales. It's our politicians. We're at their mercy. We need the majority of Republicans and the majority of Democrats, both saying the same thing. And that's when I think real change will come about. We got to tip the scales in our favor. So, you know what that means? Buckle up. A lot more people are going to die before anything is truly done.
Unfortunately, you're probably correct, and it's a sad statement. But what do you have to say to people that want to blame the user, blame my daughter, blame your son, and say, oh, well, you shouldn't have made that choice. You should never have used those drugs in the first place. And I think it's horrible that some people don't care if 107,000, 110,000, I think it was in 2022, die because they look down on people who use drugs.
You know, people, for me, I don't know, maybe I've become hard as steel, but I don't let people affect me. I keep doing my thing and doing my thing because I know I'm saving lives. You know, I'm not fighting for my son. He's dead. I can't bring him back. I'm fighting for the people that are alive to continue to stay alive because let's get real. People try illicit substances. You know, no one goes their first time and says, I'm going to be addicted one day. I'm going to be homeless on the street, shooting dope. No one's ever said that. Okay. We don't know. And there's all sorts of reasons, you know, high schoolers, good Lord, it's almost like a rite of passage to do drugs. When I was in high school, we were drinking, we were doing all that stuff. But, you know, there wasn't a death sentence in the drug supply.
You're absolutely correct. Times have changed since we were in high school. And I think drug and alcohol use was looked at as a rite of passage, right? And so that has to completely change now. And that's one of the things we're trying to do at Emily's Hope with our prevention curriculum is start in kindergarten. We're starting in kindergarten. We're starting with elementary school.
And when someone, because I've heard it quite often, well, why are these young kids popping these pills? Well, guess what? Big Pharma created a pill popping society.
Yes.
You can go on Netflix. There's a show called Xanax. And there's like a 19-year-old girl in there who's, oh, she lives off her Xanax. I mean, how many people are prescribed Xanax in the world? Hello? It's absolutely ridiculous. So why are kids popping pills? That's why kids are popping pills. Because guess what? A Xanax never killed anyone either. And a Percocet never killed anyone. They do now because they're fake. And a lot of these young kids, they just don't know. There shouldn't be any pharmaceutical commercials on TV. They should be directly with the doctors and the doctors only. I mean, people call up their doctors now. Well, I saw this on TV commercial. I need that. I must need that. I mean, come on. They're targeting people. It's a nightmare. It's money and it's corruption.
April is fighting back against that corruption and trying to get lawmakers' attention by holding her third annual march on the Capitol in D.C., set to take place in September. During the rally, hundreds of families who've lost loved ones to fentanyl will come together and demand action from the White House.
So the first year I did it, it was in front of the Chinese embassy. And then last year I was like, you know, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to go to the National Mall. So this is my third annual rally, but this is the second time I've been on the National Mall. So we'll be on the National Mall from 10 in the morning until 3. There'll be speakers on the mic all day. And then at 3 o'clock, we get a police escort and they block the roads down for us and everything while we march with our signs and our bullhorns and we chant all the way to the White House. Once we get to the White House, we'll be there like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, and we rally in front of the White House. Why do we rally in front of the White House? Because it's in front of the White House and we will get attention. And that's what we want. It's like we almost have to shame our government into doing the right thing. And that's putting Americans first, which they're not doing.
The rally is scheduled for Saturday, September 23rd. If you'd like more information on how to get involved in the event, just check out the show notes of this podcast. And while you're looking at those, we'd appreciate it if you'd give this episode a positive review and share it with your friends and family. It helps further our mission of raising awareness about our nation's deadly drug crisis, reducing the stigma associated with substance use disorder, and ultimately preventing future tragedies. Together, we can make a difference and save lives. Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. And tell me, what do you expect the turnout to be in September? What are you expecting? How big was it last year?
I didn't do a head count last year. I'm learning as I go. Every year it'll get a little better and I can change things. So I'm going to have a sign up table this year so I can actually get a head count of how many people came to my rally. Because you can ask one mom, they might say 600. You can ask another mom, they might say 1,000 people. I don't know, maybe 700 people came last year, but I'm hoping 1,000 people show up. I mean, the more of us making noise in Washington, D.C., it's our capital. I really don't want to go in front of the White House. I don't want to do that. My goal is to one day illicit fentanyl be out of the drug supply, labeled a weapon of mass destruction. The cartel's a terrorist organization. This gives our government a bunch of tools that they don't have. So it's like we're just sitting ducks here, waiting for our government to get it together. But, one day, hopefully it'll be different. And I can just do beautiful memorial events on the National Mall. That would be my dream.
Well, and this should really be a bipartisan issue because most lawmakers have been affected by this issue, whether it's someone in their family or somebody they know has died. Almost everybody at this point, with the number of people dying, have been affected by this issue. So really, it shouldn't be politics as usual. It should be uniting against a common threat.
You would think, but it's just not that way. And us parents don't make it a political issue. The politicians, both of them, the Republicans and the Democrats, they've made it political, not us.
Right. And I do think it's going to take, I've said this over and over again on the podcast, that it's going to take just a bunch of I always say angry mothers, but I'll include fathers in this too, a bunch of angry parents to create change in the world when it comes to this issue. I mean, we are losing our kids at a record rate, and it's mostly young people. And it just should not be tolerated. And they come from all walks of life and all education, all backgrounds. It doesn't discriminate.
Absolutely not. You sound like me. I say that my group, I didn't make my group to make people feel good. I'm not a grief group, even though we support each other in our grief. I'm pissed off. And honestly, I believe it's called righteous anger because nothing happening about this crisis is making God smile. He's crying. I mean, our babies are dying, and literally babies are dying now from it. So yeah, babies are dying.
Yes.
Our children are dying. Like my son didn't have a chance to recover. Before fentanyl, you had umpteen chances of recovery. Now with fentanyl and the drug supply, you don't get them chances no more.
Well, and you're right about babies. You're right about babies because we have a headline service on Emily's Hope where we keep track of the latest news involving overdose, fentanyl, addiction, all these things. And I keep seeing headlines of young children, babies and toddlers who are getting a hold of fentanyl and dying. So it's not just teenagers or people in their early 20s. It's also babies.
And that's why I say it's not limited to the substance use disorder community. This is first time, experimental, occasional users, people with an SUD, and babies. That's who's dying. So they got to do something different. They can't treat it like they were treating the crisis 10 years ago because it's not the same. You got instant death in the drug supply. They have got to do something different or we're going to get bodies on bodies on bodies on bodies. It makes me want to.
Right. Yeah, it is devastating. I agree. And you talk about righteous anger and I feel you, but also grief. Grief, it's at the bottom of it underlies everything that I do. And I'm sure it underlies what you are doing too.
Yeah, I mean, I say I'm never going to stop grieving. I don't think you can. How in the world can you ever stop grieving a child? I think it's impossible. It just fuels my fight because I don't want anybody else to feel the way I feel. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the beginning.
Yeah.
That's a deep, dark hole of a place.
Right. And some people can't crawl out of there. Some people do get stuck in that.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think in
Yeah.
2021, 8
Yeah.
moms that were mingling between my group and like all these other groups on Facebook, we lost 8 months that year to suicide.
Right. I call it collateral damage. It's the collateral damage of one death, and it just spreads out. And, that's an obvious way people are affected, but there's lots of other insidious ways that people are affected and their lives are changed too after losing someone to poisoning like
our
this.
lives were turned upside down like that. And some people, you're right, don't get out of
Right.
it. That's why for me, whatever your higher power is, for me, it's God. That's my higher power. And he's free.
In addition to her faith, new friendships have also helped April in her grief journey, particularly new relationships with parents who have also lost a loved one to fentanyl.
When my son died, my whole life changed. Everything about my life changed. And I've lost a lot of friends, but I've gained a tribe, and they all understand my pain. Like, you understand my pain. It's our new world. I never say my new normal. That term drives me crazy because
I don't like that either.
nothing
So thanks.
normal about this. But like, my new world is connecting with other people that understand. And, gosh, when I meet these new parents, when they're early bereaved, that's the hardest for me, because then I got back to when I was newly bereaved, and that was hell.
Well, I would agree with you. That affects me the most too, that you can just feel the pain, the rawness of the injury. I call it an injury, like a brain injury, when you have this sudden death and it's your child, and that is tough. And I'm glad you're out there raising your voice and speaking out. And I look forward to joining you in Washington, D.C. in September as well. I'll be there. I'll be podcasting and be there participating. So I look forward to connecting with all the other parents who were in Washington, D.C. for the rally as well.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're coming. The one thing, if I could say to like the grieving families listening, and not just grieving families, anybody, write your politicians and tell them how you feel. Like, tell them that fentanyl is different. Like, this is a weapon of mass destruction. Something different has got to be done. What they're currently doing isn't working. And how do we know? We got dead kids as proof. They continue to rise. So whatever's going on isn't working. So pressure politicians. Write a letter, send an email. All I can do is fight for those that are alive. People can call me a mob in front of the White House or a fear monger all they want. They are not going to stop me, because I know what me and all these other moms do, what we're doing. We are saving lives. We most definitely are.
Well, I love your determination. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining me, and look forward to meeting you in person in September. Emily's Hope will be at the Fentanyl March in September on the Capitol. Again, we put more information in the show notes of this podcast. Make sure to stay tuned for additional coverage of the event by following our podcasts, Grieving Out Loud, and visiting my Facebook and Instagram pages. We'll bring you updates, interviews, and stories surrounding the march. Thanks for listening. We hope you found this podcast helpful. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Anna Fye.